Hey, what is going on, everybody? Welcome into this week's edition of my top starts and sits for week 13 of the NFL season. We're in that final stretch where we're all trying to lock up our playoff positions and make that push for the championship. So, why don't I just go ahead and hop into it and see if I can help you guys out, put those lineups together, and we all exit with a victory by this Monday night. So, with that being said, as always, wide receiver and tight end position. As I always do, I am going to start with my quarterbacks. My top start, I'm going to go with T Law himself, Trevor Lawrence against the Lions. Obviously, Trevor is coming off that amazing comeback victory that the Jaguars did in the fourth quarter, where he was able to march the Jaguars down the field to take the lead over the Ravens and get that victory. And I think that he's going to carry that momentum into this great matchup that he has with the Lions on Sunday. The Lions are allowing 23.8 points per game to quarterbacks this year. That is the most across the NFL, and there's a good chance where he probably did get picked up off of waivers just because of the game he is coming off of. But if he's still out there and you're looking to stream a quarterback, I'd go pluck him and put him right into my lineup this week. My other top start, and this is definitely a name that's probably going to be out there on the market if you are looking to stream a quarterback this week. I am going to go with Jimmy Garoppolo against the Dolphins. The Dolphins are allowing 20 and a half points per game to quarterbacks this year. That is the third most in the NFL. So I think in with Mike McDaniel being the former, run game coordinator of the San Francisco 49ers, that should help his defensive coordinator at least get a game plan of how they can potentially stop the run from San Francisco. And if they are able to find any type of success, I could see San Francisco having to throw the ball more. And then you got a great matchup in terms of the fantasy numbers. So I think Jimmy G is a sneaky play this week at the quarterback spot. My sits, if there is a name you're looking to stream, I'm definitely would look to avoid Ryan Tannehill against the Eagles. Obviously, we all know at this point the Eagles have one of the best defenses in the NFL. They have so many playmakers in that secondary, even though they will be missing Chauncey Gardner-Johnson for this week in the foreseeable future. But with that being said, when you look at the terms of the fantasy matchup, they're giving up 10.3 points per game. That is the fewest across the NFL. So if you were thinking about streaming a quarterback this week, I would avoid Ryan Tannehill if I could. My other sit, yes, guys, Lamar Jackson. And if you guys are longtime listeners of mine, if you're in a redraft, if you are in a dynasty league, Lamar, you're going to play him. But I would temper my expectations where if he doesn't have the outcome that I want out of him, then you understand that he's going against one of the best defenses in the NFL, and especially in terms of fantasy in the Broncos. The Broncos are only giving up 11.9 points per game to quarterbacks this season. That's the second fewest in the NFL. So again, you're going to play him in a redraft dynasty. You spent a high pick on him. He's Lamar Jackson. So temper your expectations, but he is a guy, as far as when I'm setting my daily fantasy football lineups this weekend, I'm not going to have him in my lineups this week. So again, my top starts: Trevor Lawrence against the Lions, Jimmy Garoppolo against the Dolphins. My top sits: Ryan Tannehill against the Eagles and Lamar Jackson against the Broncos. Moving into my top starts and sits for the running back position. My top start now, obviously Nick Chubb is a play here. I left him off for a reason because nobody's ever gonna consider, like, why would you tell me to play Nick Chubb, Cody, right? So I'm not. That's why I didn't want to put his name on there. But his counterpart, Kareem Hunt against the Texans. I know Kareem Hunt hasn't been as really fantasy relevant as he has in the past, but I think this is the game where if you slide him into your flex, I think you're going to get a ceiling performance out of him, probably his best performance of the year. The Texans, they are allowing 25.6 points per game to running backs this year. That is the most in the NFL. Obviously, that's been the case. For every week, I'm basically telling you guys to play a running back against the Texans, and I can just see Cleveland going up big on the Texans early, and then what they're going to do is that's going to game script it right into a run-heavy offense, which is already pretty much a run-heavy offense. So I think Kareem Hunt's set to have a nice outcome this weekend. So if you've been having him on your bench and you're trying to figure out your flex spot, I think Hunt's a nice option to slide in there this week. My other top start, a guy that's been very quiet over the last 2 weeks. He's not having the outcomes that he was earlier in the season, but I think he's going to potentially bounce back this Sunday in that same matchup I just talked about. Dameon Pierce against the Browns. The Browns are giving up 23.7 points per game. That is the second most in the NFL. So many teams are gashing them for big chunk plays at a constant rate, and I can see that happening, and Dameon Pierce kind of getting back to what he was doing just a month ago. So if you've been upset with how Pierce has been forming, I wouldn't get too upset about it where you bench him this weekend, then you end up regretting it because then he ends up blowing up. Now obviously if he doesn't take advantage of the matchup, that will be something to have a concern going forward for the rest of the year. But with that being said, he's only had 15 yards or something crazy low the last 2 games. I think he's going to blow up this and kind of get back to an average this weekend. My other top sits, I am going to go with Raheem Mostert. Moving on to my sits, I am going to go with Raheem Mostert and Jeff Wilson Jr. against the 49ers. Now, kind of like what I talked about Mike McDaniel being a former 49er coach, obviously Kyle Shanahan's going to know the tendencies of his former run game coordinator. So with that being said, Kyle Shanahan's going to have his defensive coordinator, DeMeco Ryans, gearing up on how they can stop the run from that Mike McDaniel offense. And with that being said, the 49ers have been shutting down the run game all season long. When you look at it in terms of fantasy, they're only giving up 11.2 points per game, and that's obviously the fewest in the NFL. So yeah, even though you might want to buy into a revenge game factor for both Mostert and Wilson Jr. this weekend, I wouldn't try to feed into that too much and end up disappointed with the outcome. My other sit, I will go with Miles Sanders against the Titans. The Titans, what their defense is really good at is defending everything up front because they got Jeffrey Simmons, Danico Autry, Bud Dupree up front. David Long Jr. is a really good linebacker. So they're really good against the run this year, and it's showing in terms of fantasy where they're only giving up 13.9 points per game. That is the third fewest across the NFL. So I know Miles Sanders kind of is controlling the backfield in terms of volume. It's a nice, real run-heavy offense. So if you end up playing him, I kind of get it. I'm probably going to have to play him in my 14-team league. But with that being said, I'm tempering my expectations with the outcome, but I'm definitely not putting Sanders in any of my daily fantasy football lineups this weekend. So again, your starts, Kareem Hunt against the Texans, Dameon Pierce against the Browns. My sits, Raheem Mostert and Jeff Wilson Jr. against the 49ers, and Miles Sanders against the Titans. Moving into the wide receiver position, my top start is another rookie that's actually been quiet. It's been quiet for a while for the past month, but I think there is an opportunity for him to blow up this weekend, and that is going to be Drake London against the Steelers. The Steelers are allowing 27.8 points per game. That is the most across the NFL, so that's something where I think Drake's going to be able to see a lot of targets this weekend, and I think he's got some matchups that he can take advantage, and I would not be surprised if he ends up with at least one touchdown. I feel like there's going to be a 2-touchdown performance out of London on Sunday. My other starts, going with A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith against the Titans. Not to rehash everything I said about the Titans, being really good at the run, but what they kind of lacked at is they have been bad as far as stopping the pass this season. They're giving up 26.2 points per game to wide receivers this year. That is the second most in the NFL. So I can just definitely see the passing game opening up, and it seems like both Brown and Smith have been relatively quiet over the last few weeks, so I can see both of them going over 100 yards in this matchup, and maybe both of them getting a touchdown, but at least one of them will on Sunday. Moving into my top sits, there are some names here that are going to be temper your expectation plays for redraft and dynasty. So let's go ahead and dive into that. CeeDee Lamb and Michael Gallup against the Colts. CeeDee Lamb is a temper your expectation play, but I definitely would sit Michael Gallup in redraft and dynasty leagues, and then definitely both avoid these names on Sunday. And mainly it's because the Colts defense, it's really good as far as allowing explosive plays, and as far as in terms of their fantasy defense against wide receivers, they're only giving up 15 points a game to wide receivers this year. That is the fewest across the NFL. And I will say this, as a Colts fan, I think we're going to get our butts kicked on Sunday night. But I think that's going to be because of their defense, and their defense is going to put their offense in favorable positions. And I think if the Cowboys end up going up quick, where they go up 2 touchdowns, it's a lot to overcome for this Colts offense this season. So with that being said, that's going to go into a run-heavy game script for Dallas, where the ball is just going to be in Zeke's and Tony Pollard's hands for most of the second half. So with that being said, if CeeDee Lamb and Michael Gallup don't get their points in like the first 2 or 3 quarters, I could see them not really getting much action in the fourth quarter because they have built such a big lead on Indianapolis on Sunday night. Moving into my other sits, Terry McLaurin, Curtis Samuel, and Jahan Dotson against the Giants. The Giants, they are allowing only 17.1 points per game. That is the third fewest across the NFL. They have one of the better red zone defenses this year. They're not allowing a lot of touchdowns once teams do get down there. And I think that's why you're seeing such a low number for wide receivers, because they're not finding their way into the end zone against this G-men defense up there in New York. Now, going over these names really quick, Terry McLaurin, I'm going to play him in my leagues, but he's a temper my expectation play, where if McLaurin has one of his floor games, I totally get it. Curtis Samuel, you can kind of debate because he does get the volume, but he is a name I would definitely consider sitting in leagues. And I definitely would avoid the rookie Jahan Dotson this weekend if you have him. So yeah, those are my top sits. So again, top starts and starts of the week: Drake London against the Steelers, AJ Brown and Devontae Smith against the Titans. My top sits: CeeDee Lamb and Michael Gallup against the Colts, and then Terry McLaurin, Curtis Samuel, and Jahan Dotson against the Giants. Moving into the final segment, obviously it's the tight end position, the one position I think everybody in fantasy football cannot stand unless they are a Travis Kelce manager. Kudos to you for drafting him as high as you did, because I wish I would have done it and just stop avoiding the stupid strategy of waiting on tight ends and all that jazz. With that being said, let me dive into this. My top start, I am going to go with Tyler Higbee against the Seahawks. Obviously, they're going to either have Bryce Perkins or John Wolford at the quarterback position. But with that being said, I think the Rams are going to have to throw a lot, because I think Seattle is going to be able to get up on them at some point. And when you look as far as the fantasy defense, they are giving up 13 points per game to tight ends. That is the most in the NFL, and most by a good margin as well. So if you are considering streaming a tight end, I guarantee Tyler Higbee's going to be out there because he got blanketed last weekend, but I think he's going to have a bounce back and take advantage of the matchup that is in front of him. My other start, man, this used to be a name I would never tell people to start. I do think like George Kittle all managers are still playing him no matter what. Maybe they have a better option where they can alternate between Kittle and another guy they could stream throughout the season. But with that being said, he's definitely a name to consider with your daily fantasy lineups this weekend. Obviously I've talked about this matchup. The 49ers and Dolphins are going against each other on Sunday. And as far as fantasy, the Dolphins are giving up 9.6 points per game to tight ends. That is the third most in the NFL. I already talked up Jimmy Garoppolo, why I think he's going to be a good play, and I could see him and George connecting often and trying to get a couple touchdowns against one of their former coaches on Sunday. My top sits, sticking with that matchup. Mike Gesicki against the Niners. I don't have to talk about how great this Niners defense is, and when you look at the fantasy numbers, they're only giving up 4.4 points per game. So if you saw Mike Gesicki's name out there, you've been streaming tight ends, that's one of the names I would look to avoid. And another streaming tight end I would look to avoid is going to be Robert Tonyan against the Bears. The Bears are allowing 5.2 points per game. That is the fifth fewest in the NFL. Aaron Rodgers is banged up. It does sound like he is playing on Sunday, but with that being said, he's less than 100%. So you know what I think they're going to do in Green Bay, especially because they're playing against a weak rush defense, is I think they're going to do a little run-heavy offense with Aaron Jones and A.J. Dillon. And eventually I think they build it up enough of a lead where they're going to be in a run-heavy game script by the second half at some point. So if you were thinking about playing Robert Tonyan, you know, he hasn't been the greatest streaming tight end this year, but I think that's going to continue too on Sunday. So again, my starts: Tyler Higbee against the Seahawks and George Kittle against the Dolphins. My sits: Mike Gesicki against the 49ers and Robert Tonyan against the Bears. So yeah, that is this week's video, and Titan decided he was going to make an appearance at the end with some sneezing and getting up off his laying spot. But anyways, guys, if you enjoyed this video, hit that like button. If you haven't subscribed to my channel, make sure you hit the subscribe button. Go tell a friend to check me out. With that being said, as always, I do want to remind people if there are any players I did not talk about tonight or today, whenever you watch it this morning, get in the comment section. I'll return any comments that I get on any starts or sits questions. If you have my social medias, you can always get into my DMs. And then if you got my number, you can always shoot me a text. With that being said, you guys will see me next Tuesday evening when I do my waiver wires and streamable defenses. I hope you guys get a huge win this weekend as we go ahead and close out our playoff spots. Good luck to you all. I'll talk to you next week. Peace out.